Hey guys, well in this tutorial I'm going to go back through the Grandma's Jars budgeting system as my grandma taught me 30 years ago, but this time I'm going to tell you the key principles that come out of this budgeting system that are applicable to any money management system we would use today. So the first thing that you need to know to set up an effective budget is what are all of your expenses. This is absolutely key because if you don't get all of your expenses into the budget, you're going to consistently find that things come up and you go, oh, there's another expense I hadn't expected, another expense in my budget that completely throws things out. So we want to know up front what are all your expenses. And in the homework that you'll have at the end of this module, there is some worksheets that will help you do just that. So firstly, we need to know what our expenses are so that we, in theory, can create jars for each of those expenses. The second thing that Grandma did was she then worked out, well, how much did she need to put aside on a monthly basis so that when each of those expenses turned up. So some of the costs, of course, are fixed costs and bills where she knew exactly how much she needed to put aside, and so it was needed to put that much aside. But then, of course, there's going to be some expenses that are more wants. So things like putting aside money for hobbies, holidays, clothes, and so on. We need to figure out what is a reasonable figure that we can afford to put aside into each jar on a monthly basis. The third thing that ties in with that, of course, is that we need to make sure that we're not putting more in our jars than what we're actually earning. So Grandma knew that she had $800 to spend. She knew that what she put into each of her jars was less than the $800, and that in fact, she would have $127 left over every single month that she could put into savings. And this is that golden rule of money management. We must not spend more than we earn. So having some money left over after we've allocated our monthly allowance to each of your jars is absolutely critical. The fourth principle is that whatever we don't spend from a jar accumulates. So if you remember with the which one's this, the rates jar that we've got here, we were putting $80 per month aside into the rates jar so that when the $960 bill turned up once a year, that money had accumulated month on month on month so that the money was there to pay the bill as it turned up. So a number of your jars, so for instance, if you've got a car, you'll have car registration, car insurances, and your license every 5 years, those sorts of things where you will put money aside every month, you will accumulate until those bills turn up to pay. And that's really important. But it also applies for things like the grooming jar where you put money aside for clothes, and you might only go shopping once a month during the Boxing Day sales, once a year during the Boxing Day sales, but the money's accumulated to be able to take and spend guilt-free. The fifth principle of managing your jars is you must not spend more than you've allocated in your jars. Very simple. What you've got, it's all you've got. You need to make that money last, because if we start taking more out of that jar than we've got, then what happens? We lose our savings, and that's not what we want. Now, there are really 5 principles, but I just wanted to add the 6th one in there. And the 6th one is very simple. You mustn't take out of a full jar to top up an empty jar if you've run out of money. That's super, super important. So there we go. 6 really important principles of how to budget, and it applies to any budgeting system, no matter what you're using, whether it is glass jars or the Grandma's Jar software, which I'm going to teach you to use very, very shortly.